Starmer, 100 days in office, how have they been?
Disastrous. This is the worst 100 days of a government ever. Complete disaster. They have been covered in sleep.
I realized a long time ago that the most important thing for Starmer is not to take care of our country, but to do completely crazy things. Every day his actions become more absurd and perplexing. This time, he even openly stated that he feels hatred for our country and its history. It's just shocking. We start watching the first scene.
Drama.
Yeah.
You know, the excuses and get on and deliver for the British people. That's what people expect of our party. A good opposition and a party that's got some policies and ideas to challenge Labour.
And a couple of people have pointed out to me over the course of the weekend some stories that you got yourself involved in. Grooming gangs, for example. You say they should face whole life sentences. Why don't they?
Well, at the moment, the law, which dates back to 2003, has a maximum sentence of 14 years. And some of these vile predators have been sentenced to sentences as short as 4 or 7 years, and in fact, many are released early. So I think that's disgraceful.
Right.
We need to ensure that these people, who are amongst the most disgusting, evil people in society, are going to jail and never leaving jail.
Right.
And also, if they're not British, which in some cases they are not, then I want them to be deported.
Yeah, right.
This is just incredibly absurd. But even more shocking is that one guy received the shortest term of imprisonment, only 50 minutes. The court also sentenced him to 80 hours of correctional labor and rehabilitation. This guy, under the influence of alcohol, smashed his ex-girlfriend's window with a broom, attacked 2 policemen, and just ran away from the crime scene. Jenkins admitted his guilt and even read 2 letters of apology during the trial. How is this possible?
But I just think this is a national stain. It's one of the worst things that's happened in our country in my lifetime, and yet so few people talk about it because politicians and parts of the media are worried about being labelled as racist. They shy away from this through misplaced political correctness, and thousands of children are being abused as a result.
Yeah. And we know, for example, on Tuesday there's going to be a load more prisoners released by this new scheme where they let a load of people out. Apparently they had to put them all back in again because they all started reoffending. You know, this is kind of a mad rush to free people up.
A prisoner who took part in an anti-immigration riots during protests outside the hotel has died in prison. He served a sentence of 2 years and 8 months. Lynch, who suffers from a number of serious illnesses, including diabetes, thyroid problems, and angina pectoris, recently suffered a heart attack. He was detained for aggressively shouting at police outside a hotel in Rotherham where asylum seekers were housed. It was just one of many events that led to the arrest of more than 50 people following the Rotherham riots, and now Lynch will not be able to take advantage of the possibility of early release under the new program introduced by Shabana Mahmood.
Couple of expletives there. King Charles and everybody else looking slightly embarrassed. I mean, it's not a great look for Australia, is it? I mean, there are plenty of people in this country that don't particularly fancy the monarchy, and we know who they are. But the point is that this woman apparently is asking for reparations. She's calling for Charles to be prosecuted for genocide.
Senator Lydia Thorpe could not contain her anger and sharply criticised Charles III during his speech in the Australian Parliament, where he spoke about the Indigenous peoples of Australia. Thorpe demanded that the king return what was stolen, give us back our land, give us back what you stole. You are not my king, she screamed. This is not the first time Thorpe has protested. She has raised similar issues more than once, and therefore Charles III did not seem to attach much importance to her words, only smiling in response. 2 years ago, during the swearing-in ceremony, the senator called Elizabeth II Her Majesty, the colonialist queen, which necessitated a repeat of the event.
And I know that the last 14 years have been really, really hard. We've had austerity, we haven't had the right money and resources, we've had a reorganisation of the NHS that made no sense and made things worse, then had the burden of COVID, and everything that followed after that. And frankly, you deserve a lot better than that. And I know that when the waiting lists are so high, that has an effect on the morale of every single person working in the NHS who are doing their level best, but sort of really up against it. And I think that's the context in which this 10-year plan has to be seen, because this is a government that's not just come in to say thank you, as we rightly do, for what you're doing. It's not just...
The situation in the field of medical care has reached a critical point, and it's just a nightmare. The quality of care has deteriorated in many key areas, and patients are forced to endure endless waiting lists for treatment, which literally puts their lives at risk. The austerity measures introduced in the healthcare system have led to the fact that it is no longer able to perform its basic functions, which is simply unacceptable. People with chronic diseases such as cancer, diabetes, and depression are receiving the necessary help to control their conditions. Breast cancer screening rates in women have plummeted, which means that many women may not receive the help they need on time. Contacting a general practitioner has become a real problem for patients who have to wait for hours or even days to get a consultation. And that's not all. Only 6% of midwives believe that there are enough staff in their maternity ward to perform their duties efficiently. This just can't go on.
And back in Britain, Brendan, Keir Starmer has removed, along with Margaret Thatcher and others, he's removed the portrait of Shakespeare. Now, he lost me at Thatcher. I was furious that he removed Thatcher, but Shakespeare? Give me a break, Brendan. What is going on with Keir Starmer? 100 days in office, how have they been?
Disastrous. This is the worst 100 days of a government ever. Complete disaster. They have been covered in sleaze. It's been a chaotic government. There have been riots. There's been the clampdown on the riots. There have been attacks on freedom of speech. They've backtracked on lots of their manifesto pledges. And now they are taking down portraits of some of the greatest Britons that ever lived from...
It's just a shock and a shame. Starmer, who shouted about his patriotism from the podium during the election, now shamefully hides our legacy as if it was something shameful. He began taking portraits of the greatest statesmen from his residence, and now they are gathering dust in oblivion. First, he removed the portraits of Elizabeth I, Tudor, Walter Raleigh, William Ewart Gladstone, and Margaret Thatcher. But that wasn't enough for him. Now he's decided to throw William Shakespeare's portrait in the trash. It's not just a shame, it's cultural vandalism. Starmer is obliged to use these works of art to glorify the great figures of our history and not to hide them from the public eye. We should be proud of our identity and praise those who made our country great. No other country behaves so shamefully towards its past. And that's not all. In September, Rachel Reeves had an absurd rule: all works of art in the hall should be only about women or made by women.
Shakespeare's been taken down, Sir Walter Raleigh, Elizabeth I, Gladstone, Thatcher. I mean, the people who made this country. And when you have a government that is ashamed of the country that it governs, a government that looks with horror at the history of the nation that they are in charge of, that is really quite terrifying, actually. And it really, I think it points to a massive divide between the elites and ordinary people, where you have the elites having this shamefaced attitudes towards modern Britain and the history of Britain, whereas I think ordinary people take great pride in this country, great pride in people like Shakespeare, the most important writer that ever lived, and they think that pride should be shown in Downing Street as well.
The United Kingdom is on the brink of a serious economic and social crisis, and unless drastic policy changes take place, the situation will only worsen. However, the country's elite continues to calmly ignore this disturbing reality. The gap between the myths of a successful economy and the harsh truth of ordinary people's lives has reached a critical point. Many citizens, being in more prosperous conditions, are sincerely mistaken, believing that the economic situation is better than it actually is. These are those who earn more and have financial reserves that protect them from real risks. The political class stubbornly refuses to acknowledge the scale of the problem. Finally, the government needs to speak openly about the real problems facing the country and develop long-term strategies to solve them. Voters do not expect miracles, but they need confidence that things are moving in the right direction. Otherwise, we risk social unrest, loss of trust in political institutions, and increasing uncontrollability.
You know, we have a real problem in Europe of the Islamo-left, this unholy alliance between radical Islamists and the modern-day left. And it really came to a head over the Gaza issue and the Hamas issue and following the death of Sinwar. And I think what these two movements share in common, radical Islamists and the modern left, is just a burning, boiling contempt for the West itself, for the values of Western civilization, for the virtues of the Enlightenment. And it is that drive against modernity that brings these two forces together. And I think challenging them is such an important thing to do right now.
The Labour Party reacted violently to the shocking statements of the US vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance, who said that the UK could become the first country with Islamic rule to possess nuclear weapons. This statement caused a real storm of indignation among Labour members, including Angela Rayner, who furiously denied his words, saying that he was absolutely wrong and that such allegations were not only baseless, but also dangerous. What do you think about this video? Share your thoughts in the comments. See you later.